Hey, this is for my JMC class, Blog 7, about media and hope. I want to put a little preface on this one. It's pretty brutal. Um, and some serious things are talked about, so if that's not something you want to listen to, don't listen to this. For this blog, I wanted to focus on the Black Lives Matter movement. As a white guy, I don't have a lot to say from the perspective of the real people being afflicted and hurt and why the movement started. What I do have to say is from the perspective of someone living in a relatively small Nebraskan town during the movement and being present at the one big protest that did happen. And in relation to that, the hope that surrounded the movement before and after the protest. So, obviously, Black Lives Matter protests across the country were met with some pretty serious uh, repercussions, retaliation, whatever you want to call it. A lot of police stations cracked down on stuff like that, and it was kind of a big moment of, hey, why do people seem to care so much about these protests than others? And I think that's a topic for another time, but I think that's applicable to my hometown, where the one protest that was big and did happen and happened outside of the city courtroom was really bad. The protest was peaceful. The protest went fine, but there were a lot of cops that showed up. And there were significantly less cops than there were protesters. I'd say, I mean, I don't actually know numbers, and if I say something, I'm probably going to think of a number bigger than it is. But what happened is tear gas was used, and so everyone felt that. But that's not that crazy, all things considered. What did happen though is a lot of people were hurt. I was lucky enough to not be hurt, but I also am not entirely certain it was luck, and I'm pretty sure it was more along the lines of I'm a white guy, and so I wasn't the target. There were a lot of people who I knew, and people who I was close friends with, who left with broken bones, who left shattered emotionally. And this didn't get covered, as I'm sure many of things like this didn't get covered across the country, where small towns have, you know, protests and the local police don't like it. So they had police come from the town over, and it was a whole thing. However, even after this happened, there were still protests. There were still protests in a smarter way, admittedly. There was no longer as much of a threat of being harmed by the police. One, because the police knew to a certain extent that they shouldn't have done that, because when they did it, people started getting really angry. People started like flooding their mailboxes, flooding their emails, a bunch of honestly good ways to retaliate to that kind of thing. But I do think media and hope has to do with this in a very significant way, in the fact that this situation happened because a lot of people in my hometown had never really had the opportunity to push back on the constant discrimination they faced. So, while in my hometown there aren't that many people who are African American, but there are a lot of Spanish people, a lot of Mexicans, and so a lot of those people showed up. And I think part of the problem with that was that these people didn't know exactly what they were getting into, and didn't know quite the level of vitriol they would be met with. I'm very glad that, as far as I know, no one died. But I also want to put out the idea that hope is something you need to not let control you. If you rely only on hope to do something, you're most likely going to get hurt. because hope doesn't get things done, actions do. Hope is the catalyst for action, which is why these protests happen. People wanted for change and hoped that it could happen, and when more people started doing it, more people joined. And I think it's important to know or remember and think about the fact that just because you want something to change doesn't mean it A, will happen, or B, will be safe in happen. But on top of that, nothing will change if nothing is done. So, in the future, if another big movement like this happens, if something happens on campus again with the Palestine protests, understand that in many situations, the current place we live in will use as much of a show of force as necessary to put across their political points in whatever way they need to. And if that means hurting innocent civilians during a peaceful protest and turning a peaceful protest violent simply because the police showed up and they're the ones who made it violent, they'll do that. They will. Maybe not in some place that's a little more populated, but I mean, in LA, it's pretty hard to say that's not happening now. So, media and hope is a very good thing. It's very good to have the ability to see hope, see change in the world. But it can be dangerous if you just let that hope consume you and don't think very carefully about what you say and what you do around who. Because the sad reality is, in the wrong place, you could get really, really hurt. So be careful, be smart, and I think those two traits together are some of the most important things for making change actually happen. So yeah, um, yeah, yep, thanks.